The snow fell in slow, soundless sheets over Colorado Springs that morning. Claire Whitmore stood frozen on the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear, her breath catching mid-inhale. "You need to see this video," the voice said. Then silence, except for the static hum of the store's television screen behind her. On the screen, grainy cell phone footage showed a young boy standing alone near a freight yard, wrapped in an oversized jacket, eyes scanning the horizon. The clip lasted just 11 seconds, long enough for Claire's knees to buckle, because in those 11 seconds, she saw something she hadn't seen in 5 years: his eyes. Before watching the full story, comment your current city, and don't forget to tap the like button to support this emotional journey. Claire Whitmore had always believed in patterns, clinical ones. As a child psychologist, she built her career identifying silent traumas tucked behind behaviors no one else noticed. Before the day her son vanished, Claire's world was built on logic, structure, and gentle corrections of invisible fractures in other people's families. But logic had no place in what happened to Caleb. She lived now in a small, two-bedroom rental on the edge of Colorado Springs, far enough from downtown to escape the echo of old memories, but close enough that every street corner still whispered his name. The second bedroom remained untouched since that July 5 years ago. Toys still sat in their bins, the twin bed made with his dinosaur comforter, and a paper chain countdown to first grade still clung to the closet door, faded and dust-lined. Claire had stopped seeing patients 2 months after the abduction. At first, it was the guilt. How could she help children cope with fear when she couldn't protect her own? Later, it was the noise. Every appointment began to sound like a distorted echo of Caleb's voice, his laughter trapped behind other people's problems. Eventually, she stopped returning calls altogether. The only job she still held was once a week. She worked late nights shelving books at the public library. It paid little, but the quiet comfort of stories was something grief hadn't ruined. She didn't socialize, didn't date. Her sister had tried to intervene once, gently suggesting a support group or a change of scenery. Claire hadn't spoken to her since. The one ritual Claire maintained was her Tuesday morning visits to the missing persons board downtown. The photos changed every few weeks, but Caleb stayed in the same corner, row 3, column 2. The smile in that photo was the one he wore the morning he vanished. Half a bagel still in his mouth, eyes squinting into sunlight. She'd stopped expecting updates long ago. But habit was easier to sustain than hope. People in town had stopped asking. At first, they'd offered casseroles, prayer chains, and well-meaning speculation. But over time, their eyes filled with something worse than pity: acceptance. Claire recognized it in their silence, their need to move on. But Claire didn't move on. Her days passed like chapters from a worn-out novel, familiar, faded, and reread too many times. She no longer chased leads or hired private investigators. Not since the last one. A man named Howard had sent her a photo of a child in New Mexico who looked like Caleb from the side. Turned out the boy was left-handed. Caleb had been right. Still, some part of her, buried beneath scar tissue and sleepless nights, refused to sign the emotional death certificate. She never used the word was when speaking of Caleb, always is. She didn't keep shrines. She didn't talk to ghosts, but she felt him. That's why when her phone rang that winter morning and a voice she barely recognized said, "Claire, I think you need to see this," she answered without hesitation. And when she saw the video, only 11 seconds of footage, it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like breath returning to a body long thought, still. Colorado Springs was the kind of place people described as safe, a city framed by snowy peaks and an unshakable belief that bad things happened elsewhere. There were hiking trails, locally owned bakeries, and neighborhoods where people still left their doors unlocked during the day. Claire had chosen it for that very reason when Caleb was born. It felt like a place where childhood could be protected. Palmer Lake Park, where Caleb disappeared, was the kind of place parents took their kids on Sundays without thinking twice. Families grilled hot dogs while kids kicked soccer balls or chased ducks by the pond. That day, July 15th, was the town's annual Summer Bloom Festival. There were booths with face painting, funnel cakes, live music, and a petting zoo set up in the south field. Claire remembered the smell of kettle corn and sunscreen. Caleb had wanted to ride the pony twice. She had said yes, he was 6. just tall enough to ride without an adult. She'd stood 10 feet away, camera in hand, capturing a blurry photo of him with his arms raised, laughing, his small body swaying gently with the movement of the pony. Afterward, they got lemonade. He spilled some down his shirt and made a face like it was the end of the world. She wiped it off and told him he looked cooler that way. The moment that changed everything lasted less than 4 minutes. She'd taken a phone call, just one, from work, a crisis at the clinic she no longer remembers the details of. Caleb had been coloring at the make-your-own mask table near the volunteer tent. When she turned back around, he was gone. At first, she assumed he had wandered off to the petting zoo again, or to the bubble machine near the playground. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then her voice began to crack as she called his name. Someone brought her a security officer. They made an announcement over the loudspeaker. The music stopped. The laughter faded. The festival became quiet, confused. By the time the police arrived, the park had already been cleared. Search teams combed the nearby woods and parking lot. Drones were deployed. Dogs sniffed the trails. People came forward saying they had seen a boy in a blue dinosaur shirt heading toward the bathrooms or running near the water. None of the sightings led anywhere. In the weeks that followed, the town became a maze of posters, press conferences, and vigils. Volunteers walked in shifts, handing out flyers with Caleb's photo on them. Claire remembered standing in the grocery store, watching someone pin one to the bulletin board between lost cats and babysitting offers. There was a $50,000 reward posted. Tip lines were flooded with hoaxes, false leads, and a few well-meaning but irrelevant claims. A man from Arizona swore he saw Caleb on a bus heading to Tucson. Another woman said she dreamt his location, insisting he was buried beneath the gazebo. The police were kind, but after 2 months, the updates stopped. They told Claire they were keeping the case open. 3 years later, the Summer Bloom Festival returned. Claire stayed home, blinds closed. That same night, someone slipped a folded drawing under her front door. It was a crayon sketch of a smiling boy holding a red balloon, signed simply, "Come find me." The handwriting didn't match Caleb's, but she kept it anyway. What hurt more than the silence was how time kept moving. The park reopened. The lemonade stand came back. Children ran again in the same place where hers had vanished, and Claire felt like she was the only one standing still. Her world had shrunk into a routine of avoidance. She no longer drove past Palmer Lake. She'd memorized back roads to bypass the areas that triggered her: the elementary school, the toy aisle at Target, the little diner where they used to share pancakes. But Colorado Springs remembered. Not always visibly. But sometimes a stranger would meet her eyes a little too long, and she'd know they recognized her. The mother of the boy who disappeared. She became a symbol people didn't want to look at. Proof that safety was an illusion. Now, standing in front of a flickering store window in the heart of downtown, watching the 11-second video over and over, Claire realized something she hadn't dared let herself feel in years. Hope. Not the delusional kind that once made her fly across states chasing rumors. This was quieter, more dangerous, because the boy in the video wasn't just similar to Caleb, he mirrored him. The shape of his mouth, the way his eyes darted when nervous, the way he shifted his weight, one foot tapping the pavement like he was counting something only he could hear. Claire's heart wasn't guessing, it was remembering, and that was the most terrifying part. As Claire rose to leave, she reached into her coat pocket and carefully pulled out a single item, an old laminated photo card, Caleb's first grade picture. Round cheeks, crooked smile, the same eyes. She placed it gently on the table. "That's the boy you remind me of," she said. "His name was Caleb." She didn't say is. She was no longer sure which tense belonged here. Back in her car, Claire sat for nearly 20 minutes without starting the engine. Her thoughts spun. The boy, this version of her son, was alive, but his mind was warped, cleaned, altered, like someone had redrawn his memories with sharper, colder lines. She opened her notebook and began writing down everything. The red balloon, the field, teacher, Mr. Box, fear of the word before. Then she underlined it twice. Teacher said we don't talk about before. This wasn't just neglect. It was conditioning, and it wasn't the work of someone impulsive. Whoever had taken him, if it truly was Caleb, had created a structure. Claire couldn't go to the police. Not yet. She had no proof. Just a gut feeling, a few symbols, and a boy who didn't even know who he was, but she knew someone who might help. She reached into her glove compartment and pulled out an old, creased card. Oliver Rise, retired FBI. He'd helped families like hers before the Bureau changed directions. She hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, but she still had his number. Tell us where you're watching from and hit subscribe to follow stories that truly matter. This one will stay with you long after it ends. For the man who used to find patterns in chaos before the FBI lost its appetite for messy cases. He looked at her for a long time. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a small notepad. Start from the top. Over the next hour, Claire relayed everything: Caleb's behavior at the shelter, the drawings, the old habits reemerging under pressure. The more she spoke, the more Oliver's walls seemed to shift. Not fall, but shift. You're saying someone took your son, reprogrammed him, and put him back into the system? Not quite. I think they dumped him. On purpose. Maybe the person who took him couldn't control him anymore. Or maybe they knew they were being watched. Oliver flipped through his pad. And the boy said not to call the police? Claire nodded. Exactly. And that's why I came to you, because someone trained him to be afraid of authority. Oliver rubbed his jaw, eyes scanning nothing in particular. This is bigger than a kidnapping, Claire. I know. He pulled out his phone and began typing. I'll reach out to a friend in records at the DOJ. If there's been any weird adoption or foster filings tied to Caleb's birth certificate or a falsified version of it, I'll find it. Thank you. He looked at her, serious. But if we do this, you need to be ready for what we find. People who erase identities don't usually do it for love. Claire looked down at the napkin with the box symbol. Neither do people who steal 6-year-olds from public parks in broad daylight. 3 days later, Claire stood in front of the shelter again, this time with an appointment. She was escorted to a small playroom where Eli Caleb was building a tower with foam blocks. He looked up when she entered. This time he smiled. You came back. Claire smiled back, even as her heart twisted. I said I would. People don't always mean what they say, he replied matter-of-factly. Claire knelt beside him. I always will. He handed her a block. Can you help me build the roof? Teacher said I wasn't good at finishing things. Claire paused. Well, I think teacher was wrong. Probably with a new identity. Claire leaned back in her chair. She didn't just steal him, she tried to replace him. That's not the worst part. Oliver slid another document across the table. The network is still operating, under a different name, different location, and someone else took it over after she left. Who? A man named Richard Ellis, former child behavioral consultant. He and Teresa co-authored a paper in 2015, Cognitive Renewal and Disruptive Youth. Their philosophy? Remove negative stimuli by removing identity, then reprogram. Claire closed her eyes, nausea rising. They erased him on purpose. Later that day at the shelter, Claire found Caleb alone in the art room. He was drawing again. This time it wasn't balloons or fields. It was a house, small, square, windowless, a black door. Claire sat beside him quietly. That's new. Caleb kept coloring. It's from before. Claire's breath caught. Before what? Before teacher said I was too old to keep secrets. Did you live in that house? He nodded. Was teacher there? He paused. Then, only when we did lessons. The other man stayed the rest of the time. Claire's grip on the table tightened. What other man? Caleb drew a stick figure, taller, next to a smaller one. The larger one had lines drawn from its mouth, shouting. His name was Mr. R. He had a notebook, always wrote things when we were bad. Claire reached out slowly. Did he ever hurt you? Caleb looked down at his drawing, then at his own hands. His fingers flexed unconsciously, an old tic from when he was overwhelmed as a toddler. Sometimes we weren't allowed to eat. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He simply said it like he was naming colors. Did anyone else live in the house? A girl, older than me. She didn't talk much. Teacher said she failed. Claire swallowed hard. Where did she go? Caleb looked up, confused. She stopped waking up. Then the van came. Claire could barely keep her voice steady. Do you remember her name? He shook his head. They said names made us weak. That night, Claire typed a message to Oliver. He mentioned another child, a girl. Something happened to her. He thinks she died. They made them erase names. This wasn't a home. It was a lab. Oliver's reply came quickly. Then it's time we treat it like a crime scene. Claire felt the weight of every mile as she drove toward the outskirts of Rock Springs, Wyoming. The landscape flattened out here, endless stretches of sagebrush and dry earth beneath a pale blue sky that promised summer heat by midday. The GPS was set for an address Oliver had uncovered, a small ranch house on a quiet dirt road, miles from the nearest neighbor. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. This was no longer just a search for her son. This was a reckoning. Oliver sat silently beside her, reviewing the case files on his tablet. He glanced up occasionally, his sharp eyes catching every curve in the road, every flicker of movement on the horizon. "We don't know what Teresa will say," he said finally, voice low, "or if she'll even answer the door." Claire nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm ready." The house looked deserted at first, weathered wood, paint peeling in long strips, but had a front porch sagging under years of neglect. No cars in the driveway, no sign of life. But Claire's gut told her they were not alone. Oliver motioned to the side yard. "There's a detached garage. If she's here, she'll hear us coming." They approached cautiously. Claire's heart pounded so loud she was sure Teresa would hear it before they knocked. Oliver raised his hand and rapped sharply on the door. They waited. Nothing. A second knock, then footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing Teresa Kane's narrow, lined face framed by tightly pulled back blonde hair. Her pale blue eyes locked onto Claire with a cold sharpness. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Teresa said without invitation. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. Claire swallowed, stepping forward. "We need to talk." Teresa's gaze flicked to Oliver and back. "About the boy? The one you call Caleb?" "Yes." Teresa opened the door wider and motioned them inside. The house smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and old paper. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight cutting through the curtains. It was surprisingly tidy for a place that looked abandoned from the outside. They sat at a worn kitchen table, Teresa folding her hands neatly. "I did what was necessary," Teresa began. "You don't understand. That boy was broken when he came to me. The world outside wasn't safe for him. I gave him structure. I gave him purpose." Claire's voice shook. "You took him. You erased his identity." Teresa's eyes hardened. "I saved him. That world would have destroyed him." Oliver spoke quietly. "Who was the other man? The one Caleb called Mr. R?" Teresa's face darkened. "Richard Ellis. He designed the program, the methods. He left years ago, but his influence is still here. That house, the program, it was never a home. It was a lab." Claire's fists clenched. "You let a child starve? You imprisoned him in that place?" Teresa's gaze flickered but didn't waver. "Discipline is necessary. Love alone doesn't prepare a child for the world." Claire felt bile rise. "You lied to him, told him his mother abandoned him." Teresa stood suddenly, voice rising. "You were never coming back. You left him to rot. I did what you couldn't." Oliver intervened, calm but firm. "We're here to find the truth, to bring Caleb home." Teresa's shoulders slumped. "You can't take him, not yet, not until he's ready." Claire's eyes burned. "He's ready now. He needs to come home." Teresa hesitated, then said quietly, "There's more. The facility, the original site, is not far from here, hidden. You'll find answers there." The drive to the facility was tense and silent. They arrived at a nondescript building overgrown with weeds and surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The sign read, "Alta Census Program, temporarily closed." Oliver pulled out a set of keys he'd acquired through a contact. The gate creaked open. Inside, they found a labyrinth of cold concrete corridors, reinforced doors, and sterile rooms lined with peeling paint. Claire's breath caught as she imagined Caleb running these halls, small, scared, trapped. They entered what appeared to be a classroom. Desks were overturned, notebooks scattered. On the whiteboard, faint writing remained. Identity equals control. Obedience rewarded. Memories are shadows. Claire's eyes filled with tears. This was his prison. Suddenly, a noise behind them. A door creaked open. They turned to see Caleb stepping into the room, hesitating, eyes wide. Claire rushed forward, pulling him into a tight embrace. "You're safe now. You're home." For the first time in years, Caleb's body relaxed against hers. Oliver looked on, silently vowing to uncover every secret this place held. After the cold, empty halls of the Alta Census facility, Claire held Caleb tightly, feeling the tremor in his small frame. The boy she once knew was still inside, fragile, confused, and deeply wounded. But he was alive. They drove back to Colorado Springs in heavy silence. Caleb sat between Claire and Oliver, glancing out the window as the world blurred past, but not yet speaking. His fingers absent-mindedly traced the edges of a small stuffed animal Claire had brought, a token from his past, a piece of the childhood stolen from him. At home, Claire prepared Caleb's favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with extra sharp cheddar. She watched as he poked at the food, eyes wary. "It's okay if you're not hungry," she said softly. Caleb nodded, but didn't answer. That night, as Claire tucked him into the bed they'd kept ready for him all these years, Caleb's hands clung to hers. "Mom," he whispered, voice barely audible, "I'm scared." She smiled through tears, stroking his hair. "I'm here. You're safe. We'll face it together." For the first time in 5 years, Caleb closed his eyes without flinching. The following days brought unexpected challenges. Caleb's memories surfaced in fragments, flashbacks of the house with no windows, the man named Mr. R, the girl who never woke up. He struggled with his identity, torn between the person Theresa Kane tried to shape and the boy Claire remembered. At school, he was both curious and fearful, overwhelmed by noise and new faces. Therapy sessions were painstaking. Claire watched as Caleb wrestled with trust, with fear, with hope. Oliver remained a steady presence, investigating Theresa's network, uncovering documents that revealed the dark extent of the conditioning program. He warned Claire to prepare for setbacks. Healing was not linear. One afternoon, Caleb found an old photo album Claire had kept hidden. Flipping through images of birthdays, vacations, ordinary days filled with laughter, his eyes softened. "Is this me?" Claire nodded, voice breaking. "Always you, no matter what." He touched a picture of himself and Claire holding hands. "I want to remember." Claire smiled, heart full. "And I'll help you." Together, they began the slow journey back, from erased identity to reclaimed self, from captivity to freedom. It would take time, patience, love, but for the first time in years, hope wasn't just a word, it was a promise. This character truly deserves a like. But sadly, they haven't received one yet. Be the first to change that. The sterile room at the medical center smelled faintly of antiseptic and cold metal. Claire sat clutching Caleb's hand, her heart pounding as a technician carefully collected blood samples from the boy's small arm. Oliver stood nearby, grim-faced but quietly hopeful. Weeks earlier, a preliminary DNA test had hinted at a connection, but now they waited for the official confirmation, the undeniable proof. Days later, Claire received the call she dared only dream of. "Claire Whitmore? This is Dr. Morgan from the State Forensic Lab. The results confirm a 99.999% match between your DNA and the sample provided." Her hands trembled as tears streamed down her cheeks. Caleb was her son, but confirmation was just the beginning. News of Caleb's return and the horrific story behind it soon spread beyond their small community. Local media picked up the story of the Nova Potential program and the Alta Census facility. Public outrage grew as the details of the psychological conditioning and illegal custody filings surfaced. Legal battles quickly followed. Theresa Kane and Richard Ellis faced charges ranging from child abduction to unlawful imprisonment and psychological abuse. Claire testified about the trauma Caleb endured and the desperate fight to reclaim him. Public support poured in, but so did skepticism. Some questioned the validity of Caleb's memories. Others debated the ethics of exposing such dark truths. Oliver advised Claire to prepare for a long fight, not only in court but also in public opinion. Despite the challenges, Claire held fast. For her son, for the truth, for justice. The courtroom was cold and unyielding, but Claire's heart was a furnace of fierce love and determination. She watched Caleb sit beside her, small and still, absorbing the weight of the day. His eyes, once vacant, now flickered with cautious awareness. Outside the walls of legal battles, the real work began. Caleb's emotions were a tangled knot: fear, confusion, anger, and at times a fragile hope. He struggled to trust, often retreating into silence when overwhelmed. Memories came in shards, a smile here, a harsh word there, the shadow of a door closing. Claire held his hand through every step, patient and unwavering. "It's okay to feel scared," she told him gently one evening. "You're safe now. You're home." Slowly, Caleb began to reclaim pieces of himself, the boy who loved dinosaurs, who dreamed of swimming in lakes, who felt his mother's warmth even across years of darkness. Therapy was a labyrinth, but each breakthrough was a beacon. Claire and Caleb started small traditions: story time, bike rides, pancake breakfasts, ordinary moments filled with extraordinary meaning. Neighbors and friends rallied around them, offering support that felt both comforting and grounding. One afternoon, Caleb sat on the porch swing, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. He turned to Claire, eyes bright. "Mom, am I really me?" Claire smiled, tears glistening. "You are, and we'll keep finding your you together." It was the beginning of a new chapter, one written not in fear or control, but in love and hope. If this story moved you even a little, consider subscribing. It helps us bring more real, powerful narratives to life. Every subscription means we can keep telling stories that need to be told. Stories like this one. Your support is more valuable than you think. The days after Caleb's return blurred between hope and hardship. Claire quickly learned that healing wasn't linear. There were mornings when Caleb woke screaming, haunted by nightmares of locked rooms and cold faces. Evenings when he withdrew into silence, too overwhelmed to speak. Their home, once a sanctuary, felt unfamiliar. The walls held memories Claire cherished, but Caleb saw shadows. Every creak of the floor, every unfamiliar noise stirred anxiety. Claire struggled with her own emotions, relief tangled with guilt, hope shadowed by fear. She worried about pushing Caleb too fast or holding him too tight. "I don't want to lose you again," she whispered one night, tears dampening his hair as she cradled him. Caleb didn't answer but pressed closer, as if seeking reassurance in the quiet. School posed new challenges. Caleb was behind by years of learning and struggled to concentrate. The noise, the crowds, it was overwhelming, but teachers noticed his determination. Small victories, answering a question, making a friend, were celebrated like milestones. Therapy sessions became a safe place where Caleb could express feelings he couldn't voice at home. Slowly, he learned to name his fears and articulate his hopes. Claire joined some sessions, learning how to support him without overwhelming. One afternoon, as they walked through a local park, Caleb stopped and looked up at Claire. "Will you stay with me, even if I'm scared?" Claire smiled, squeezing his hand. "Always." It was a fragile beginning, but it was theirs. Caleb's journey toward himself was filled with difficult questions and small triumphs. He struggled to reconcile the boy who had been lost with the one who was returning. One afternoon, during a quiet moment in therapy, Caleb looked up with a mix of confusion and determination. "Who am I really? Am I Eli or Caleb?" Claire reached out, her eyes soft but steady. "You're both in a way, but mostly you're you, the person you want to be." It was a revelation, a beginning. At home, Claire found old photos and mementos, gently encouraging Caleb to explore his past at his own pace. He traced his fingers over birthday cakes, family vacations, the stuffed animals that once comforted him. "I want to remember," he whispered. School became a place not just of learning, but of belonging. Caleb reconnected with friends from before and forged new bonds. Every day was a test of courage, but also a step toward normalcy. One evening, as the sun set behind the Rockies, Caleb stood on the porch, holding the old photo of himself and Claire. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm ready. Ready to be me." Claire's heart swelled with pride and relief. "Welcome back, Caleb." They still faced challenges ahead, but for the first time, the future felt open, a story waiting to be written together. The morning light spilled softly through the curtains, painting warm streaks across the hardwood floor. Claire sat quietly at the kitchen table, sipping tea, the house still and peaceful for once. Across the room, Caleb pulled on his jacket, preparing for their visit to Palmer Lake Park, the place where his disappearance had fractured their lives. It was a pilgrimage, a step toward healing. As they arrived at the park, the familiar scent of pine and fresh earth wrapped around them like a balm. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. The lake shimmered under the gentle breeze. Claire watched Caleb's eyes scan the horizon, tentative, curious, alive. He walked slowly to the water's edge, picking up a smooth stone and tossing it into the lake. Ripples spread wide. Turning to Claire, Caleb smiled, a real unguarded smile. "I remember this place," he said softly. The stone skipping contests, the way the sun felt. Claire's throat tightened. "You're home, Caleb. You're safe." He nodded, eyes bright. "I want to keep moving forward, with you." They stood together on the shore, a mother and son bound not just by blood but by the hard-won journey back to each other. As they walked back toward the trailhead, Caleb paused, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, hand-painted rock, a symbol he had made during therapy. For the new beginning, he said. Claire took it, holding it close, a tangible promise of hope, love, and the future they would build together. Back in the quiet of their living room, the evening sun cast a golden glow through the windows. Claire and Caleb sat side by side, a photo album open between them. Their fingers traced the edges of old pictures, snapshots of laughter, holidays, and simpler times. Caleb looked up, eyes filled with a newfound clarity. Mom, I think I'm ready to say it. Claire smiled gently, waiting. I am Caleb. Her heart swelled. And I am so proud of you. They embraced, two souls reunited after years of silence, pain, and uncertainty. The road ahead was still long, but together they would write every page. As night settled outside, Claire whispered softly, We can't take back the lost years, but we can build every moment from here, a chapter of hope, love, and belonging. Whatever comes next, we face it as one. Love. Caleb nodded, eyes shining with quiet determination. The future was unwritten, open, fragile, and full of promise. The end, but only the beginning of a new story. If this story touched you, please subscribe to support our team, share this video with friends and loved ones, and leave a like to show your support. We also invite you to comment below. What moved you most? Would you like to see a part 2? Your voice matters and helps us keep going.